Welcome to The Timeless Mind, your ultimate source for bite-sized wisdom from the most powerful books ever written. If you've ever wanted to absorb life-changing lessons from classic books without spending hours reading, you're in the right place.
This is Series 1, Episode 7, The Psychology of Money Mastering the Mindset of Wealth.
Get ready to dive deep into Morgan Housel's brilliant book, The Psychology of Money, and uncover the secrets to building a healthy relationship with your finances. You ready for this?
Absolutely. Let's unpack some of these insightful concepts.
Okay, so you know how sometimes you catch yourself making a financial decision and can't quite explain the why behind it?
Like that impulse buy you totally regret, or
Yeah.
sticking with a certain investment even though it's not doing so well.
Exactly. Housel says that's often our money history at work, those past experiences that shape our present-day choices.
It's fascinating how he breaks it down. For instance, imagine growing up during a recession. You constantly hear about job losses and financial struggles.
Yeah.
That experience can make you super cautious with money later in life.
Totally. Or picture this. You got a big chunk of money early on, maybe an inheritance or an investment that took off. Housel suggests that kind of early windfall can create a different relationship with risk.
It's like our brains are wired by those experiences leading us down certain financial paths.
Housel even points out that things like our parents' attitudes toward money play a role. Think about it. If you grew up hearing your parents constantly stressing about bills, that anxiety can stick with you.
It's almost like we inherit a financial script, even if it's not serving us well anymore.
Which is why understanding our money history is so important. It helps us make sense of seemingly irrational decisions and rewrite that script if we need to.
So it's not just about budgets and spreadsheets. It's about recognizing those deeper psychological forces at play.
Right. And speaking of unexpected forces, Housel dives into something that most of us don't like to acknowledge: luck.
He really challenges this idea that financial success is always about brilliance or hard work.
He argues that luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. It's easy to look at billionaires and think, wow, they must be geniuses. But Housel says a lot of it comes down to being in the right place at the right time.
He uses the example of Bill Gates and his high school friend Kent Evans, both incredibly bright and ambitious. But Gates had access to a computer lab at his school, a rare thing in 1968. Who knows what could have happened if Evans had had that same access?
It makes you realize how much chance encounters and just plain luck contribute to success.
And on the flip side, bad luck or risk can lead to failure, even when someone makes smart choices.
Housel makes us rethink how we perceive and judge others when it comes to financial outcomes.
It's more nuanced than just labeling someone a genius or a failure. There are so many factors beyond our control.
Okay, so we've talked about our past experiences and the role of chance. But Housel also explores the concept of enough. Why do some people, even after achieving incredible financial success, keep chasing more?
He shares this cautionary tale about Rajat Gupta, a former Goldman Sachs director. This is someone who had it all: wealth, power, respect. But he got caught up in insider trading, risking everything for even more money.
It's almost like once you reach a certain level, the goalposts keep moving.
Social comparison becomes a real trap. You're always looking at someone else's highlight reel and feeling like you're falling short.
Housel says that the hardest financial skill is getting those goalposts to stop moving. Being content with what you have is a crucial part of building a healthy relationship with money.
So it's not just about how much money you have, but your mindset and how you define success.
Exactly. This next concept is a bit of a mind bender, but stick with me. Housel argues that time is one of the most powerful tools we have for building wealth, and he's not just talking about investing.
What's so interesting is that he links time to the concept of energy wealth.
It's like how we've become more efficient with energy consumption. Instead of always searching for new energy sources, we focus on making the most of what we have. Housel suggests we can apply the same principle to our finances.
We can build wealth by being more efficient with the money we already have, cutting back on unnecessary expenses, making our savings work harder for us. It's a different way of thinking about wealth, not just focusing on earning more, but optimizing what we already have.
It's like finding those small energy leaks in your house. They might seem insignificant, but over time they add up.
Absolutely. Small changes in our spending habits can have a huge impact on our overall financial well-being.
And speaking of time, let's not forget the magic of compounding.
This is where it gets really exciting. Think of it this way. You invest $100 today. With compounding, it's not just earning interest on that $100. It's earning interest on the interest too, Over decades, that seemingly small starting point can snowball into something impressive.
And who better to illustrate this than Warren Buffett? Housel highlights that a staggering 99.9% of Buffett's wealth was accumulated after his 50th birthday.
Talk about long-term thinking. It's a potent reminder that even if you're not seeing massive returns right now, staying focused on the long game can lead to remarkable results.
Time is on your side, even if you're just starting out on your investment journey. Don't get discouraged by those ups and downs.
And remember, saving isn't just about accumulating wealth. It's about giving yourself options and freedom.
I love that perspective. It's about having the ability to walk away from a job you hate, to take a break when you need it, or to pursue opportunities that bring you joy, even if they're not financially lucrative.
Housel gives the example of a young person who saved enough to cover a year's worth of expenses. This wasn't about getting rich, but about having the freedom to quit a soul-crushing job and pursue something more meaningful.
That kind of freedom is priceless. You can make choices based on your values and priorities rather than feeling trapped by your circumstances.
Saving allows you to weather unexpected storms and pursue those opportunities that might not be available to those living paycheck to paycheck.
It's about taking control of your financial future and designing a life that truly reflects what matters to you.
Speaking of control, let's talk about embracing a pretty reasonable approach to financial decision-making. Housel acknowledges that we're not always perfectly rational when it comes to money.
Emotions can hijack even the best-laid financial plans.
Right. And trying to be perfectly rational all the time is unrealistic. It's like ignoring a fever because it's uncomfortable, even though it's your body's way of fighting off infection.
Sometimes the most rational choice just doesn't feel good emotionally.
Exactly. Housel encourages us to aim for pretty reasonable instead of perfectly rational. It's about making informed choices while recognizing that it's okay to factor in your feelings and peace of mind.
We can acknowledge those emotions without letting them completely derail our plans.
And remember that financial decisions aren't just about numbers and spreadsheets. They impact our lives, our well-being, and our relationships.
Now let's dive into one of the most fascinating aspects of the psychology of money, the power of narratives and expectations.
Housel uses this captivating thought experiment where an alien visits Earth in 2007 and again in 2009. The alien observes the same infrastructure, the same technology, the same people. But in 2009, everyone is panicked and the economy is in shambles.
What changed? The story. The narrative shifted from optimism to fear, and that fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
If enough people believe the economy is going to tank, their actions can actually bring about that outcome.
It highlights how much our financial behavior is driven by stories about ourselves, about the economy, about the future.
And those stories can be incredibly powerful, even if they're not rooted in reality.
So it's crucial to be aware of the narratives that are influencing our decisions and make sure they're empowering, not limiting.
What stands out to you about this idea of narratives? Have you ever noticed how they shape your own financial outlook?
That's such a great question, I think. Yeah, sometimes I think back to like when I first graduated college, I was, just starting out my career, and man, oh man, did I make some questionable financial choices back then.
Well, we've all been there. It's part of the learning process, right? Figuring out what works for you and what doesn't.
I guess so. But it makes me think about this concept that Housel talks about called sunk costs. You familiar with that one?
Definitely. It's that tendency we have to stick with something just because we've already invested a lot in it, whether that's time, energy, money, you name it. It's like that old saying, throwing good money after bad.
I mean, I can totally relate to that. I've held on to certain investments way longer than I should have just because I was like, well, I've already put so much into this, I can't give up now.
It's a tough one because sometimes it really does make sense to stay the course. But Housel encourages us to ask ourselves this question. If I were starting from scratch today, would I still make the same choice?
That's a good one. It helps you remove the emotion from the equation and think about it more objectively, kind of like an outsider looking in.
Exactly. And speaking of things that can make us emotional, let's talk about volatility, those ups and downs in the market. How do you approach that?
Honestly, it used to freak me out. Seeing my investments drop in value, even temporarily, it would make me want to pull all my money out and hide it under my mattress.
I get it. It can be scary, especially if you're not used to it.
Yeah.
But Housel has this really interesting perspective on volatility. He calls it a fee, not a fine.
A fee, not a fine. Interesting. What's the distinction there?
Well, think of it this way. When you go to an amusement park, you pay an entrance fee to get in right. And once you're inside, you expect to go on rides. some of which might be a bit wild and unpredictable.
So you're saying volatility is kind of like the price we pay for the opportunity to participate in the market?
Exactly. And just like you wouldn't expect a roller coaster to be a smooth, flat ride, you shouldn't expect the stock market to be a steady climb upwards.
It makes sense. The key, I guess, is having that long-term perspective and understanding that historically the market has trended upwards over time.
Right. And that brings up another point that Housel makes about knowing what game you're playing financially.
What does he mean by that?
Well, he's basically saying that it's important to define your own goals, risk tolerance, and time horizon.
Because what works for one person might not work for another. Like a young person who's just starting out might be okay with taking on more risk than someone who's nearing retirement.
Exactly. And someone who's saving for a down payment on a house might have a different investment strategy than someone who's saving for retirement decades down the line.
So it's all about having a plan that's tailored to your own individual needs and circumstances.
Absolutely. And remembering that there's no right or wrong answer. It's all about finding what works best for you. Now, another concept that Housel talks about is the importance of respecting the mess.
Respecting the mess. That's an intriguing phrase. What's that all about?
Well, it's basically acknowledging that financial decision-making isn't always neat and tidy. There can be ups and downs, unexpected challenges and emotions that come into play.
Yeah, it's definitely not a straight line to success.
Right. And sometimes we make mistakes or things just don't go according to plan. Housel encourages us to embrace that messiness, learn from our experiences, and adjust our course as needed.
It's like giving ourselves permission to be human, to not have all the answers all the time.
Exactly. And to remember that even the most successful investors have had their share of setbacks and failures along the way. It's all part of the journey.
So instead of beating ourselves up over our mistakes, we should focus on learning from them and becoming more resilient.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the relationship between wealth and ego. This is where things get really interesting. Housel makes the point that true wealth is often hidden.
Hidden. What do you mean by that?
It's not about the flashy purchases, the expensive cars, the designer clothes. It's about having the financial security to make choices based on your values, not on the need to impress others.
So it's more about what you don't spend than what you do spend.
Exactly. He gives the example of Rihanna, who almost went bankrupt despite her massive income.
Wow, I didn't realize that. What happened?
She got caught up in maintaining a certain image and spending lavishly on things that ultimately didn't bring her true happiness.
It's a good reminder that money can't buy happiness and that sometimes the pursuit of wealth can actually lead us further away from what truly matters.
Housel argues that building true wealth requires humility, the ability to resist inflating our ego with material possessions.
It's about finding contentment and satisfaction in those things that money can't buy: experiences, relationships, personal growth.
And having the freedom to live a life that's authentic to you without feeling the need to keep up with the Joneses. What about you? Have you ever caught yourself making financial choices based on ego or the desire to impress others?
Oh, definitely. I remember. Yeah, there was this one time back when I was, I don't know, maybe 25 or so. And I was doing okay financially. I mean, I wasn't rich or anything, but I had a decent job and I was, starting to save some money.
Right.
And I remember I really wanted this like fancy sports car. It was way out of my budget, but I just had this idea in my head that, if I had that car, people would see me as successful and like I had made it or something.
Right, right.
And I almost went through with it too. I even went to the dealership and took it for a test drive. But luckily I came to my senses before I signed any paperwork.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was a close call though. It's crazy how easily we can get caught up in that comparison game and, like you were saying, letting our ego dictate our financial decisions.
It's so easy to fall into that trap.
Mm.
But Housel reminds us that true wealth isn't about keeping up appearances. It's about having the financial freedom to make choices that align with your values.
Yeah, and sometimes that means making choices that might not be the most flashy or impressive to others, like driving a modest car or living in a smaller home even if you could afford more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about prioritizing what truly matters to you and not letting your ego get in the way of making sound financial decisions.
One of the things that really stuck with me from the book is Housel's idea about having a barbelled personality when it comes to money.
That's a good one. What did you take away from that?
Well, it's this idea of being both optimistic about the future and paranoid about what could go wrong.
Right.
And I was like, how do you balance those two things? Like being hopeful about the possibilities, but also being prepared for potential setbacks.
It's a delicate balance, for sure. But I think it comes down to having a healthy dose of realism mixed with optimism.
Yeah.
It's, like you said, being prepared for the worst, but hoping for the best.
And that preparation often involves having a margin of safety, right? Like an emergency fund or diversifying your investments so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And it also means approaching financial decisions with a room for error in mind.
Yeah, not assuming that everything's going to go perfectly according to plan.
Right. Because, let's be honest, life rarely goes according to plan. There are always going to be unexpected twists and turns.
Speaking of which, Housel talks a lot about the importance of thinking long-term, especially when it comes to investing.
Yeah, he's a big believer in the power of compounding and letting your investments grow over time.
He points out that Warren Buffett has held on to many of his investments for decades, riding out countless market crashes and corrections.
And it's clearly paid off for him. He's a great example of the benefits of patience and discipline in investing.
And I think it's also a good reminder that we shouldn't get too caught up in the day-to-day fluctuations of the market. It's more about the long game.
Absolutely. The market is going to go up and down,
Yeah.
but over the long term, it has historically trended upwards.
You know, another thing that Housel talks about is how our perception of wealth can get distorted. Like, we tend to focus on the visible signs of wealth, the big houses, the fancy cars, the luxurious vacations.
Right.
But true wealth isn't about keeping up appearances. It's about having the financial freedom to make choices that align with your values.
Totally. It's about living a life that's authentic to you and not feeling pressured to keep up with the Joneses.
He gives this example of someone who chooses to drive a modest car and live in a smaller home, even though they could easily afford more.
Yeah.
And he says their wealth isn't on display, but it's evident in their financial stability and their ability to live life that's true to themselves.
It's a great example of how wealth is more about how you live than what you own.
Now, one last concept I want to touch on is Housel's idea that our financial decisions are often influenced by the stories we tell ourselves.
Oh, yeah, the narratives.
Right. And those narratives can be so powerful even if they're not based in reality.
Like the story that housing prices always go up.
Exactly. Or the story that I need to make a ton of money to be happy.
Or the story that I'm just bad with money.
Right. All those limiting beliefs that can hold us back from achieving our financial goals.
So how do we avoid falling prey to those misleading narratives?
Well, Housel suggests developing a healthy skepticism, doing your own research, and seeking out diverse perspectives. It's about being a critical thinker and not blindly accepting what you hear.
It's like being a detective.
Exactly. We need to question those stories and make sure they're grounded in facts and not just fueled by hype or fear.
Because ultimately, the stories we tell ourselves have a huge impact on our financial behavior.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the psychology of money.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. So many insightful takeaways.
What stood out to you the most?
Oh, I think for me, it's a reminder that financial decision-making isn't just about numbers and spreadsheets. It's also about understanding our own psychology, our emotions, our biases.
Yeah, it's about being aware of those deeper forces that are driving our financial behavior.
And it's about finding a balance between being optimistic about the future and being prepared for potential setbacks.
Right. It's not about being perfect. It's about being pretty reasonable.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that financial success is a journey, not a destination.
So as we leave you to ponder all these insights from the psychology of money, we want to leave you with one final thought. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of financial advice, what would it be?
What wisdom have you gained over the years that you wish you had known earlier?
Think about that as you continue your own financial journey. Until next time, keep those timeless minds engaged.